and welcome to GED. Today we are doing something a little bit different. We're doing an Unholy guide pre-patch 8.0.1, and we're just going to lay down a no BS kind of guide on talents, runes, macros, visuals, and all that jazz. So without further ado, let's get started. The very first thing you want to do as any class you play is set up weak auras to get all your indicators for all your cooldowns, all your powers, runes, etc. Now, if you notice here, I got all my runes here as these glowy fire. I like a visual representation of my runes. I don't like to have just spinny bars and spinny wheels. Let me just go into combat real quick and I'll show you a few more of my indicators. Over here you have Strangling Grasp. Here I have Death Coil procs. I have my pet. And then if I put some wounds on the target, I have my Apocalypse. All these indicators really help me to just kind of get a flow of combat, know what's off cooldown without having to look down here or over here or anywhere else and try to time when stuff comes off cooldown, because it's right there in your face, ready to go. At a later point in time, I might share my UI as I evolve it and set it up. Okay, so Unholy. Unholy is the #1 spec, I think, that is a reactional spec rather than a rotational spec. And it all boils down to this part of our class right here, Runic Corruption. Every time you spend power, you have a chance to increase your runic regeneration by 100% for 3 seconds. This thing, after the pre-patch, is just, I don't know, it feels like it needs to be buff, because as Unholy DK, you can go rune starved super easy. Alright, so basically, I put priority on Death Coils as the #1 thing you can be doing all the time, because you want Runic Corruption as much as possible. Otherwise, you're going to rune starve yourself. No matter what you're doing, you will rune starve yourself. Everything else in the class has pretty much been stripped down to a very simple rotation. And sorry, here, I gotta get this up. So Festering Strike, same as it was. You put 2 to 3 wounds on a target. It has dropped 1 wound. It's no longer 2 to 4. But also the maximum amount of runes you can have, I'm sorry, not runes, Festering Wounds you can have on a target has dropped from 8 to 6, which makes our rotation a little bit more tighter. But again, it's reactional, it's not rotational as most classes. Your primary outbreak, you know, put a dot on the target. You always want this up, always, and always have your virulent plague ticking. You don't have to refresh outbreak all the time, but you want virulent plague at least on your target all the time. And you know, that's pretty much it. The same stuff is still from Legion. You got your Death Coils, you got your Fester Strike, you got your wound popping ability, which for me, I use Clawing Shadows. We'll get into that in a second. Now, that's pretty much it. We'll get into rotation later, but now let's take a look at your talents. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, so feel free to pause, rewind, whatever. First row, you have Infected Claws, which is from our artifact weapon before. All will serve Clawing Shadows. Now, this complete row #1 is 100% your choice, like 100%. For me, I love range combat. I love people never ever escaping my damage radius, so I go Clawing Shadows all the time. Some people like more wounds on the target from their pet, but you got to get close enough to do damage, and I like Clawing Shadows. Next, ignore this. This is from my piece of artifact equipment that I have on right now, the Soul of the Death Lord. But basically, you have an AoE talent, a damage over time buff, and your extra damage cooldown. Now, I've tested this damage cooldown. I don't really like it. It feels like it's too long of a cooldown for too little damage. I always go Even Fever because I like my virulent plaguing, ticking, popping, exploding, doing wound damage. It's just amazing for both AoE and single target. Next row, 58. You have Grip of the Dead, which reduces movement speed by 90%. It's pretty good, but it's not good on Unholy. It's good on Blood Spec, so we ignore that one. You're going to have to choose between Death's Reach and Asphyxiate. Death's Reach, every time you kill an enemy, you get the cooldown of Death Grip Reset. It's pretty dang good, but it's not good in PvP, and I'm mostly a PvPer, so I like Asphyxiate. Now let me tell you why I take Asphyxiate. Because if you're fighting a one-on-one with any class and you need that extra burst window where you can CC and catch up to them, you're gonna need Asphyxiate to basically immobilize them. Death's Reach doesn't work when you're doing one-on-one because you're not going to be killing anybody to get the reset. But then again, if you're dotting up an entire BG full of people, you could get resets on it. Go Asphyxiate, in my opinion, your choice. 60 talents. We have Pestilent Pustules, which bursts a festering wound, has a 10% chance to get your runic corruption. It's okay, but you don't burst enough festering wounds to really make it cycle a lot, in my opinion. Harbinger of Doom, Sudden Doom triggers 15% more often and can do 2 charges. I love this talent, guys. Sudden Doom is basically every time you auto attack someone, you have a chance to get a free death coil. And if it's triggering 15% more often and you're accumulating 2 charges, you're never missing that extra death coil and you're getting much more death coils, which brings us back to Runic Corruption, which again, well, you can't see it right now, but Runic Corruption is what your spec relies on. You have to cycle your runes, get them speeding up. Soul Reaper got nerfed. It does about the damage of 2 Festering Strikes for an instant cast with no rune cost. It's okay for damage, but if you read it, you have to kill somebody to get the second part of it. And you're not really going to be killing that many people in PvP. Maybe as a PvE talent, it's okay, but why would you take it when you can just be death coiling the crap out of people, cycling your runes more? Next row, we have Spell Eater. Ignore that one completely. Don't ever take Spell Eater. You have Wraithwalk, which is... I'm so sad that they moved this to a talent. It should be part of our spec still, but it's the same as old Wraithwalk. You move super fast for 4 seconds, and anything trying to root you is ignored. Death Pact, basically a 50% heal on a 2-minute cooldown. Now, Unholy is, in a way, the number one thing that negates our damage is range between us and the target. So if you want to be sticking on a target, annoying the crap out of them, just ruining their life, you want Wraithwalk all the time, no questions asked. Yeah, you can be bursted down, but that's what healers are for. I don't want to waste a cooldown on a 50% heal when I can be in the face of whoever's trying to kite me and killing them. Next, we have Pestilence, Defile, and Epidemic. It's really your choice in this talent tree. All of these are basically AoE talents. You have Death and Decay, has a 10% chance to apply a festering wound. You have Defile, which is an expanding AoE Death and Decay and does a lot of damage, also boosts your mastery. Actually, no, it doesn't. It doesn't boost your mastery anymore. Okay, ignore Defile. Never take Defile. Epidemic is... I don't like Epidemic, and let me tell you why. Because it costs rune power. Basically, when you're spamming your abilities, when you're AoEing, you're dropping a Death and Decay, and you are just kind of spamming both wounds and you're popping them with your either Clawing Shadows or Death Strike. And basically, Epidemic just doesn't fit into the rotation. I mean, it's okay, but it's not that great. If you want true burst AoE, you take Pestilence, and you have that 10% chance per tick to apply wounds to everything in that AoE. It's far superior in my opinion. Once you drop that Death and Decay, and you just start spamming your Clawing Shadows or whatever you're using to pop those wounds, it does massive damage because everyone has wounds popping on them. And you don't even have to spend your runic power. You can save your runic power for finishing off whatever survives the AoE. Okay, last talent tree is your 100s. We have Death Coil, reduces the cooldown of Apocalypse by 1 second and Army of the Dead by 5 seconds. This one, I don't know, I've been playing with it. I like it, but it seems a little underpowered. Unholy Frenzy gives you a 20% haste for 12 seconds and inflicts wounds on a single target that you're auto-attacking. This is super, super good. I like this talent a lot because it's basically like a mini Bloodlust every 1.3 minutes. Summon Gargoyle is basically your Arbiter from Legion. You got a Gargoyle for 30 seconds. The only problem with this ability, guys, is that it's 3-minute cooldown. 3 minutes is far, far too long. I mean, maybe in raiding it'd be okay, but you can either have a mini Bloodlust every like 2 every 3 minutes, roughly, or you have just a Gargoyle every 3 minutes. For me, I think Unholy Frenzy would probably beat that out. In fact, here we go. We're switching back to Unholy Frenzy right now. That's pretty much it. So for me, again, I'm just going to reiterate this. My personal favorite talents are Clawing Shadows, because no one can escape your grasp, and it does a lot of damage. Even Fever, because I want that dot ticking hard, ticking fast. Asphyxiate to CC anything that's in my way, be it PvE or PvP, right? You want to CC people in PvP, of course. Harbinger of Doom. You want death coils. You want so many death coils that you can just like be buried in amount of death coils. Wraithwalk, because I don't care about healing myself. I care about killing the enemy and being in their face. Pestilence, the #1 AoE talent in my opinion, because everything gets wounds and you're popping wounds all day long. Unholy Frenzy, it's just, who doesn't love Mini Bloodlust? Mini Bloodlust is amazing. And then that brings us over to the PvP talents. Here we have Gladiator's Medallion and Adaptation. These are the only 2 you should ever take. Gladiator's Medallion, your trinket. Adaptation, your auto trinket. I'm lazy, guys. I like Adaptation. Go for it. Plus I'm an orc, so I get 20% off CC anyways. So I don't care if I'm mini CC'd after I adapt. Talent #1 should always be Wandering Plague. Wandering Plague got buffed amazingly in this expansion, guys. Wandering Plague literally is like your your second or third most damaging ability in PvP. It's crazy. I think Blizzard's gonna nerf it, but right now, Wandering Plague always, guys. Decomposing Aura. I love this talent personally because it does damage. Damage is damage is damage. A percent of people's max health is what you want. You want that ticking, rolling max health damage all the time. The last talent you want. Necrotic Strike is not that good in my opinion. Yes, I'm going to get flamed for it. Oh, but you can prevent healing on a target. Well, okay, if I do damage to a target, I'm still preventing healing. Why do I need to make a damage shield when I can just eliminate a target? You have basically 2 options, in my opinion, for the last and final PvP talent. You either have Unholy Mutation, which when your dot gets purged or removed or falls off, if it just goes away on a target, it does 400% of eruption damage. That's like 4 ticks instantly. And on top of that, 6 seconds of 50% movement speed. That is nuts. That is so annoying to people. And you're going to be dotting up the entire enemy team, so when someone does like a Dispel or a Purge or a Shield or whatever, it's beautiful. It's pure beauty. Last talent you should consider in this last slot is Necrotic Aura. Yes, you can take Decomposing and Necrotic Aura. 12 yards, 8% increased magical damage. There's nothing to say there other than it's damage. It's extra damage for you. It's extra damage for your team. That's the big thing. Your team gets extra magical damage. So amazing. That's it for talents. Rewind, check it out, look at it if you want. Okay, guys, second half of the guide. we're going into two things. We're going into macros, and we're going a little bit into rotation. But again, I stress this, Unholy is reactional, not rotational. So it's going to be really hard to show you the exact rotation. So if you look down here, my attack key is a macro, my basic attack key. And my attack macro for Festering Strike is simple. Pet attack, cast Festering Strike. Now why do I have pet attack in there? Because you always want your pet focusing what you're focusing. You don't want them running across the arena, running across the PvE area, chasing after something when you're sitting there trying to wail on a different target. Just don't do it. Make this macro. Festering and pet attack. Clawing Shadows. I don't put this on a rune because it's my long range popper for wounds, right? I don't feel the need to macro it with anything else. It just needs to be by itself. Next in the line is my H key. And yes, I play very weird keys, but don't worry about it. You put this on what you want. For my Death Grip, I use a cast sequence macro. Death Grip is cooldown of 25 seconds, so I want it to reset every 24 to be ready for Death Grip when it's up. First, I Death Grip, then I Chains of Ice, and then I have extra Chains of Ice just in case the first one gets dispelled. So what happens here, let me just show you on this training dummy real quick. If I hit Death Grip, and then I hit the same key, I got my Chains of Ice. I don't have to press another key. In fact, when the enemy's flying at me, it actually chains them in the air. So I'm gripping them, I'm chaining them in one quick button press. Just tap, tap, and they're stuck in my aura of pain, right in front of me. Perfect. You can copy this macro if you desire. Next up, we have my CC macro. Again, I take Asphyxiate always, because CCing casters, CCing people when they need to be destroyed is crucial. My Choke macro is again a cast sequence. Sorry, can't talk here. Reset 44. Why? Because Asphyxiate is on a 45-second cooldown. So I want the macro to reset every 44 seconds right before it comes off cooldown. And what do I got in this macro? I got Asphyxiate and Mind Freeze. Mind Freeze is your 15-yard interrupt. So what happens when I use this macro? It's not going to work on a training dummy, but if I press my macro, it asphyxiates them, and then without pressing any other keys, if they come out of the asphyxiate and they're trying to cast a heal or a purge or some ability with a cast time, I got my instant Mind Freeze ready to go. Saving keys, saving lives, because that's what we do. Alright, so, sorry here. Next up I have my Death Strike. Death Strike is just kind of like your save your butt button, you know, trying to heal back damage as you take it. That doesn't need really a macro. And then my next key, M, is Death and Decay. So Death and Decay, right? Oh, sorry, I gotta move this out of the way because you guys can't see it. So most people, when they play, and this is especially true for Blood Death Knights, they hit the Death and Decay button, and then they spend like 2 or 3 seconds trying to target it and get it down. But you don't want to be wasting precious seconds just trying to get your Death and Decay in the right spot. You want to cast at cursor macro, Death and Decay. Why? Because this, wherever my mouse is, I'm just dropping that Death and Decay, ready to AoE. You just got to make sure that your mouse is over the target, and you're good to go. I have an extra backup Chains of Ice key, and then I have my pet macro. So this is a simple macro for pets. /use no pet, raise dead, dark transformation. Also, I keep Gnaw on this cooldown. So what does this do? Well, if I don't have a pet, if my pet is gone, and I need a pet out, or I'm just in the heat of combat spamming my Gnaw button to try and stun a target or transform my pet, I'm like, transform my pet, transform my pet. Oh crap, I don't have a pet. I hit that key, it summons my pet. I'm going to hit the exact same key, and boom, it transforms my pet. And it also casts Gnaw, so he just went and stunned somebody for 2 seconds. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful macro. Again, saving you buttons, saving you time. If you notice, I just used Wraith Walk, and that's because I just accidentally pressed my Y key. My Y key has my Flee macro, which tells my pet to follow me, and also has a cast sequence of Death's Advance and Wraith Walk. So both of those are on cooldown now, but basically it's saving me trouble when I'm trying to get somewhere. So when I press this button, if my pet is off attacking something, like if I tell him to go attack that target, so there he is attacking, I'm going to press this button and he's coming back to me while I'm using my movement abilities. And this just basically keeps me from staying in combat in PvP, it keeps my pet where I want him to be, and it gives me my mobility. There you go, the Y key. Wraithwalk was just used, so that means if I press it again, Death's Advance was just used. I can literally just chain my movement abilities to prevent what? Prevent kiting. Yes, kiting is an Unholy DK's worst enemy. Alright, my last and final macro is G, which is Apocalypse. Now, I'm an orc. You can be playing any other character. This is probably the biggest, most important macro we have as an Unholy Orc Death Knight. Your race and class may vary, but of course for Unholy we want our Blood Fury, we want our Apocalypse, we want both of our trinkets to go into this Blood Fury rotation. Let me just give you a quick example of what this macro does. So I'm at a target, I stack him with 2 wounds, I stack him with 4 wounds. Apocalypse only bursts a maximum of 4 wounds now, guys. So I'm going down to my macro key, I'm hitting it, and boom, I got my trinket A-wing, I got my Blood Fury, I got my ghouls spawning, because I Apocalypse, Blood Fury, and trinketed all at the same time. It's just burning tons of damage out, tons of damage. And this is also assuming you have trinkets that are on use. Those macros are what I use. Feel free to vary them up as you see fit. I don't have Unholy Frenzy in a rotation right now, but I can put it somewhere into my macros. You find out what talents you use, work them in there. That's it, guys. Okay, now we come to the pain in the butt part of the guide, where I try to explain our rotation. Again, our rotation is reactional, not rotational. It's hard to stress that, but you guys will get it once you kind of see it in effect. So, before you even approach a target, what are you doing? You're doing 3 things. You're dropping your Army of the Dead if it's up, then you are putting your Plague on the target, and finally, you are dark transformationing your pet. Why do we want to do all these things? It's because all of these things use the GCD, and the GCD now, just to get into your target, it's going to take you about 4.5 seconds. 4.5 seconds. That is a crazy amount of time to just be prepping your pre-combat abilities, but it's technically true. So, those first 3 things, again, I reiterate. Army of the Dead, putting your Plague on, popping your pet. Dark Transformation. There you go. In this scenario, I am running Army of the Dead just for simplicity's sake. These other 2 cooldowns could be used at the very start of the fight. Once you actually make contact with that training dummy, with that target, with that alliance player, you are putting on your Festering Wounds. You're stacking at least 2 button presses of Festering Wound. That'll give you anywhere between 4 and 6 Festering Wounds. This is where it starts to go crazy. So I'm going to go through this very slowly, very slowly. Our first 4 abilities, right? Army of the Dead. It's on cooldown for me, but I'm summoning ghouls. Then I'm running towards the target. I'm putting my Plague on him, okay? And then I'm transforming my pet. So I got my first 3 abilities down. Then I press 1 Fester Wound, 2 Fester Wounds. I only got 4 stacks, but 4 is all we need for Apocalypse. So, you can see right here my spinning wheel tells me that I need to Apocalypse right now. Apocalypse. It also procs my Trinket, my Blood Frenzy, and it's spawning the ghouls. After you do these things, you dump power. You dump all of your runic power. By this time, you should be close to losing your dot, so you re-put your dot on. Then you begin stacking wounds. You dump your runic, and then at the very, very end, you can pop some wounds with your Clawing Shadows or Scourge Strike. I'm going to back away here because what I just went through was very complicated and very rotational. But don't think that you're rotational, because depending on how many Festering Wounds, depending on your Runic Corruption procs, you're going to be reacting to how many runes you get back, to how many runes you're able to use, and if you're rune starved, which can happen. Alright, so you got it? Good. No, I know you don't got it, but we're going to walk through it one more time at a little bit of a quicker pace so you kind of get the feel of how you should be playing your DK. This time we actually have Army of the Dead off cooldown, so I can walk you through it. Alright, so Army of the Dead, right? First 3 abilities, here we go. Army of the Dead, we're summoning. We drop our Plague, we transform our Ghoul, we Fester Strike twice. Okay, we got 5 wounds, we Apocalypse. We dump our runic power, You always want to dump your runic power. So reapply wounds, and now we can finally start to pop them. But oh look, we're basically rune starved because our runic corruption didn't really get there. Put your plague back up, you always want it there, and then restack your wounds. We're still rune starved. We're rune starved, and now we can finally pop a wound. Dump your runic. Always dump your runic when it comes up. Pop a few wounds. Now we're rune starved again. Okay, we got a few wounds. Our plague is going to be coming off, so we reapply. We got a proc. We dump the rune. We pop some festers. Super, super complicated, right? I know. It's hard, but you have to understand that you're just kind of reacting to what you have available. You're getting all of your runes spent, and then you're basically seeing what you need to reapply. Do you need to reapply your plague? Do you need to reapply your festering wounds? Are you up to maybe 5 or 6 festering wounds because you got lucky on your strikes and you just need to pop a few? Unholy DK is 100% a reactionary spec. And I hope this helped you a little bit, but contact me if you need more advice. Good luck, guys. Okay guys, here's just a little bit of a bonus ending part of the spec, and this is how to do AoE damage. Now this is why I take Pestilence, which Death and Decay has a 10% chance to apply Festering Wound to the enemy, and opposed to Epidemic, which spends 30 rune power to cause your plague to flare up and do AoE damage to everyone affected by it. And without further ado, it's a pretty simple, really super AoE rotation. You drop Death and Decay, and you wait till wounds start spawning on all these targets, and you just start spamming your Clawing Shadows. You're popping wounds, you're popping so many wounds. But one thing I forgot, don't forget to put up your Plague so it affects all targets. That's it. Man, that does so much damage. Again, damage meters are not useful now because we can't compare to other specs because it's the beginning of the expansion. But just drop that Death and Decay, spam that Clawing Shadows or Scourge Strike, pop those wounds as they come up, and you're just going to do massive AoE with 2 buttons basically, plus your Plague. That's it guys, take it easy.